The sun rose slowly over the rolling hills, and Daniel was already awake. He was a young cowboy, quiet and thoughtful. Living on the edge of a small frontier village that morning, he saddled his horse and rode into the open plains, hoping to find wild horses for his uncle's ranch. The ground was still cold and a gentle breeze touched his face. Daniel liked mornings like this. When the world felt calm and new, he rode deeper into the hills, following hoofprints in the dirt. Daniel's village always warned him about Apache camps. Everyone was afraid of the Apache, but Daniel had never met one. To him, they were only stories told around the fire at night. With every crunch of his horse's hooves, Daniel wondered if today, those stories would become real. Suddenly, a sharp sound broke the silence. Daniel pulled his horse to a stop, listening in a thicket not far away. Something moved. Daniel's heart raced. He slid off his horse, crouched low, and moved closer. He saw a girl, young with long black hair and calm eyes, hidden behind a fallen tree. She looked at Daniel but did not show fear. Daniel stayed quiet, watching. He saw that the girl was building a small fire and arranging some wildflowers nearby. She wore a simple dress made of deerskin and moved with care. Daniel had never seen anyone like her. He was sure she was Apache. Daniel's hands shook. He did not want trouble, but he did not want to turn home empty-handed. Suddenly, a branch snapped under Daniel's foot. The girl turned sharply. Daniel panicked and tried to back away, but in his fear and confusion, he tripped and fell. The girl jumped to her feet and started to run. Daniel caught her arm gently but firmly. He did not want to hurt her, but he wanted her to stop running. The two stood still, breathing hard. The girl stared at Daniel with strong, steady eyes. She did not beg or cry. Instead, she pointed to herself and quietly said, "Taya." Daniel felt both surprised and a little ashamed. He nodded and said his name. Daniel. Even though they spoke little of each other's language, there was a moment of strange trust when Daniel looked around. He saw signs that others had been there, footprints and a basket of berries. He realized she might not be alone. Suddenly, Daniel remembered all the warnings about Apache warriors. His heart pounded with fear. He guided Taya towards his horse, hoping to keep her safe and avoid danger. As Daniel led Taya back to his village, Taya did not fight or scream. She walked with her head high. Daniel did not tie her hands. Instead, he led her gently. Confused by how brave and calm she was, the two moved through the tall grass, their shadows stretching behind them. When the village came into view, Daniel could see the smoke rising from chimneys and hear the barking of dogs. He knew the people there would have many questions. When he entered the village with Taya beside him, everyone stopped what they were doing. The blacksmith dropped his hammer, and several women pulled their children inside their homes. Daniel's uncle rushed over, wide-eyed and nervous. The whole village gathered around, whispering. Daniel explained that he had found Taya alone in the hills. He insisted that she meant no harm. Taya stood quietly in the center of the crowd. She did not look afraid. Her eyes were calm, and her hands were folded in front of her. Some villagers called her a spy. Others wondered if she was lost. A few praised Daniel for his brave capture, but Daniel did not feel like a hero. He looked at Taya and saw only a strong, silent person who had done nothing wrong. Daniel's uncle decided that Taya should stay in the village until they could decide what to do next. They gave her a small room in the barn. Mary, the village widow, offered her food and water. Daniel sat outside the barn that night, thinking hard about what had happened. He knew he had started something big, though he didn't understand what it would become. That night, Daniel could not sleep. Outside his window, he saw a small figure move quietly across the yard toward the trees. It was Taya, moving softly like a shadow. Daniel watched her kneel at the edge of the woods and place a flower down. She sat for a while, looking at the stars. Daniel wondered what she was thinking. He felt sadness for her, taken from her home and family, but also awe at her courage. As the night grew colder, Daniel wanted to speak to her, to learn her story, but he did not know how. He promised himself he would try the next day. As he drifted off to sleep, he wondered if capturing Taya was a mistake, or the start of a new friendship. He could not know how her quiet strength would soon change his village. The morning after Daniel brought Taya to the village, the news spread like wildfire. Every man, woman, and child knew about the Apache Girl. Some people whispered behind closed doors, while others stood in small groups talking loudly. Fear and excitement filled the air. No one could agree on what should be done with her. Daniel woke early, troubled by what he had started. He walked through the village square and felt the weight of many eyes on him. Some neighbors nodded at him with respect. Others turned away. Their silence spoke louder than words. Daniel's chest tightened. He wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. Old Mr. Henderson, the blacksmith, was the first to speak openly. He clapped Daniel on the shoulder and said, "You did good, boy. We can't have them sneaking around our lands." Daniel forced a smile but said nothing. Inside he felt confused. Taya had not been sneaking. She had simply been there, existing in a place she probably called home. At the far end of the square, a group of women gathered near the well. They spoke in hushed voices, glancing toward the barn where Taya was being kept. Mrs. Thompson, a stern woman with sharp eyes, said loudly, "What if her people come for her? What if they attack us in the night?" The other women nodded nervously, clutching their shawls closer. Fear had taken root quickly. Meanwhile, inside the barn, Taya sat quietly on a wooden bench. Mary, the kind widow, had brought her a bowl of porridge and a blanket. Taya accepted them with a small nod. She did not smile, but her eyes showed gratitude. Mary tried to speak to her gently, asking simple questions, but Taya only listened. Her silence made Mary both curious and sad. By midday, the village council gathered to discuss what to do. The council was made up of 5 men, the oldest and most respected in the village. Daniel's uncle, Mr. Carter, led the meeting. The men sat around a large wooden table. Their faces serious. Daniel stood in the corner. Listening carefully, Mr. Carter spoke first. "We have an Apache girl in our village. Some say she is a spy. Others say she is just a lost child. We must decide if we keep her here or send her away." The room filled with murmurs. Each man had a different opinion. Mr. Lawson, a farmer with a loud voice, said, "If we let her go, she will tell her people where we are. They will come with weapons. We should keep her as insurance." Another man, Mr. Green, disagreed. "That's foolish. If we keep her, her people will think we are holding her prisoner. That will bring war faster than anything else." The argument grew heated. Voices rose and fists pounded the table. Daniel felt helpless, watching the men argue over Taya as if she were an object, not a person. Finally, Mr. Carter raised his hand for silence. "Enough. We will keep her here for now, but we will not harm her. We will treat her fairly and see what happens. If her people come, we will deal with it then." The decision was made. Though no one seemed fully satisfied outside, the children of the village were more curious than afraid. A small group of them gathered near the barn. Peeking through the cracks in the wood, they whispered to each other, wondering what an Apache girl looked like up close. One brave boy named Tommy dared to knock on the barn door. Mary opened it slightly and shooed them away, but not before they caught a glimpse of Taya sitting calmly inside. Tommy ran back to his friends, breathless with excitement. "She's not scary at all. She looks just like us, only different clothes." The other children listened with wide eyes. Their fear began to fade, replaced by wonder, as the day went on. Daniel could not stop thinking about Taya. He wanted to speak to her, to understand her story. In the late afternoon, he approached the barn. Mary was leaving with an empty bowl. She smiled at Daniel and said, "She's a gentle soul, that one. I don't think she means us any harm." Daniel nodded and stepped inside. Taya looked up at him, her dark eyes calm and steady. Daniel did not know what to say. He stood there awkwardly for a moment, then finally spoke. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to bring you here like this." Taya tilted her head slightly. As if trying to understand his words, she did not respond. But something in her expression softened. Daniel sat down on a crate across from her. He pointed to himself and said his name again. "Daniel?" Then he pointed to her. "Taya." She repeated his name slowly. "Daniel." Her voice was quiet but clear. It was the first word she had spoken since arriving. Daniel felt a small spark of hope. That evening, the village was tense. Families locked their doors early. Men stood guard near the edge of town, watching the hills for any sign of movement. Rumors flew that Apache warriors were gathering. Preparing to attack, Daniel knew these were just fears. Not facts, but fear was powerful. Late that night, Daniel could not sleep. He got up and walked to his window in the distance. He saw a faint glow near the barn. Curious, he put on his boots and walked quietly outside. As he got closer, he saw Taya standing near the edge of the woods. She had placed a small bundle of wildflowers on the ground. She knelt beside them, her head bowed. Daniel watched from the shadows, not wanting to disturb her. He realized she was praying or honoring something sacred. In that moment, he understood that Taya was not a threat. She was simply a young woman far from home. Holding on to her beliefs and her dignity, Daniel felt a deep respect for her. As Taya returned to the barn, Daniel slipped back to his house. His mind was full of questions. He wondered how someone so young could be so brave. He wondered what her people were like, and if peace between them was even possible. That night, Daniel made a silent promise to himself. He would protect Taya, no matter what the village said. He would prove that she was not the enemy. Days passed slowly in the village, and Taya remained as quiet as ever. She did not cry or complain. She simply watched and waited. Her silence puzzled many people. Some thought she was planning something dangerous. Others believed she was too afraid to speak. But Daniel saw something different in her eyes. He saw strength, patience, and wisdom beyond her years. Mary continued to bring Taya food each day. She tried to learn more about the girl through simple gestures and drawings. Taya would nod or shake her head, sometimes pointing at objects to show understanding. Slowly, Mary began to see patterns in Taya's behavior. She noticed that Taya always faced east when she prayed, and that she touched certain plants with great care, as if they were sacred. One morning, Mary brought Taya a basket of wildflowers. Hoping to brighten her day, Taya's eyes lit up when she saw them. She gently sorted through the flowers. Separating them into small piles, Mary watched, confused. Taya pointed to one pile and made a motion like drinking. Then she pointed to another pile and rubbed her arm. As if soothing pain, Mary realized that Taya knew about healing herbs. Mary rushed to tell the others, but most villagers ignored her. They were too busy worrying about attacks and rumors. Only a few people, including Daniel, listened carefully. Daniel visited the barn that afternoon, bringing paper and a pencil. He sat across from Taya and drew simple pictures: a flower, a tree, a bird. Taya smiled slightly and took the pencil. She drew a mountain, a river, and a small fire. Daniel understood. She was showing him her home. Meanwhile, the children of the village grew bolder. They were no longer afraid of Taya. Tommy, the brave boy, began visiting the barn every day. He would sit outside and talk to Taya through the wooden slats, even though she rarely answered. He told her stories about the village, about his dog, and about his dreams of becoming a soldier. Taya listened quietly. Sometimes she hummed a soft tune, which Tommy found comforting. One afternoon, Tommy brought his younger sister, Lucy, to meet Taya. Lucy was shy and hid behind her brother. But when Taya smiled at her, Lucy stepped forward. Taya reached into her pocket and pulled out a small carved figure. It was a tiny bird made from wood. Taya placed it in Lucy's hand. Lucy's face glowed with joy. She hugged the bird tightly and whispered, "Thank you." From that day on, Lucy visited Taya every chance she got. The adults, however, remained divided. Some still saw Taya as a danger. Mr. Lawson, the loud farmer, spread rumors that Taya was sending secret signals to her tribe at night. He claimed to have seen lights in the hills. Others dismissed his claims as paranoia, but the fear lingered. Guards were posted around the village every evening. Armed and watchful, Daniel grew frustrated with the constant suspicion. He knew Taya was innocent, but convincing the village was difficult. One evening, he approached his uncle, Mr. Carter, and asked if Taya could be allowed to move around more freely during the day. His uncle hesitated, then finally agreed, but only if Daniel stayed with her at all times. Daniel accepted the responsibility gladly. The next morning, Daniel led Taya out of the barn for the first time in days. The sunlight touched her face, and she closed her eyes, breathing deeply. Daniel walked her to the edge of the village, where a small stream flowed. Taya knelt by the water and washed her hands. Then she gathered some plants growing nearby, plants that most villagers considered weeds. Daniel watched as Taya carefully cleaned the plants and tucked them into a small cloth bag. He asked, "What are those for?" Taya did not answer with words. Instead, she pointed to a scratch on Daniel's arm. Then to the plants. Daniel understood. She was collecting medicine. He felt a deep respect for her knowledge, realizing that she carried skills his people did not have. As they walked back, a group of women saw them. One woman, Mrs. Allen, called out, "What is she doing with those plants?" Daniel explained that Taya was a healer. Mrs. Allen scoffed. "Healer, we have our own medicine." "We don't need her kind." Daniel bit his tongue, knowing that arguing would only make things worse. That night, something unexpected happened. A young boy named Peter fell ill with a high fever. His mother, Mrs. Reed, tried every remedy she knew, but nothing worked. Peter's skin burned hot, and he cried in pain. The village doctor was away, traveling to a nearby town, and would not return for days. Mrs. Reed was desperate. Mary heard about Peter's condition and quietly suggested that Taya might be able to help. Mrs. Reed was hesitant at first, afraid of what others would say. But as Peter's fever worsened, she agreed. Mary brought Taya to the Reed home. Taya knelt beside Peter and gently touched his forehead. She opened her cloth bag and pulled out the plants she had gathered earlier. Taya crushed the plants between her hands, mixing them with water from a cup. She made a paste and applied it to Peter's chest and forehead. Then she brewed a tea from other herbs and helped Peter drink it. The room was silent as everyone watched. Mrs. Reed held her breath, praying silently. Within an hour, Peter's fever began to drop, his breathing became easier, and his cries stopped by morning. He was resting peacefully, weak but alive. Mrs. Reed wept with relief and gratitude. She thanked Taya over and over, though Taya simply nodded and smiled softly. Word of Peter's recovery spread quickly. The villagers who had doubted Taya now looked at her with new eyes. Some still remained skeptical, but many others began to see her differently. Mary smiled, knowing that this was a turning point. Daniel felt a surge of hope. Perhaps the village could learn to trust Taya after all. That evening, several families sent small gifts to the barn. A blanket, a loaf of bread, a jar of honey. Taya accepted each gift with quiet grace. She did not seek attention or praise. She simply continued to be herself. Calm, strong, and kind, Daniel sat with her that night. Watching the stars through the barn door, he said softly, "You are braver than anyone I know." Taya looked at him and, for the first time, spoke a full sentence in English. "Brave is not enough, kind is more," Daniel nodded, understanding the depth of her words. He knew then that Taya was teaching them all a lesson they desperately needed to learn. The nights grew colder as autumn settled over the village, and with the cold came a new kind of fear. Strange lights appeared on the distant hills, flickering like distant stars, then disappearing just as quickly. The villagers saw these lights and their imaginations ran wild. Some believed they were Apache signals, warnings of an attack. Others thought they were spirits or omens. Either way, the lights brought unease to everyone. Daniel stood at the edge of the village one evening. Staring at the hills, he had seen the lights himself. 3 quick flashes, then darkness, then 2 more. He wondered what they meant. Were they messages? Or were they simply campfires from travelers passing through? He turned to look back at the barn where Taya stayed, and a thought crossed his mind. Did she know what those lights meant? Inside the barn, Taya sat quietly, her eyes closed as if in prayer. She had seen the lights too. From the small window near the ceiling, her heart ached with a mixture of hope and sorrow. She knew those signals were from her people. They were watching, waiting, trying to understand what had happened to her. The lights were not threats, they were questions. A silent call asking if she was safe. Taya wanted to respond, to let her people know she was unharmed. But she also knew that any signal from her might cause panic in the village. She did not want bloodshed. She had seen kindness in Mary's eyes, curiosity in the children's faces, and conflict in Daniel's heart. These people were not all bad, they were simply afraid. Just as her own people were afraid, the next morning, Mr. Lawson gathered a group of men in the village square. His voice was loud and urgent. "Those lights are Apache signals, they're planning something. We need to prepare for an attack." Several men nodded in agreement. Their faces grim. Mr. Carter, Daniel's uncle, tried to calm them. "We don't know that for certain, let's not act rashly." But fear had already taken hold. The men decided to increase the guard around the village. Armed men were stationed at every corner, watching the hills day and night. Women and children were told to stay indoors after sunset. The atmosphere grew tense and trust became a rare thing. Even neighbors looked at each other with suspicion. Daniel felt torn between 2 worlds. He knew the villagers were scared, but he also believed Taya was innocent. He visited her that afternoon and found her sitting by the window. Gazing at the hills, he sat down beside her and asked quietly, "Do you know what those lights mean?" Taya looked at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Daniel leaned forward. "Are they dangerous?" Taya shook her head. She pointed to herself, then to the hills, then made a gesture like cradling something in her arms. Daniel understood. The lights were her family, her people checking on her. They were not planning an attack, they were simply worried. Daniel felt a surge of relief mixed with sadness. He realized how deeply Taya must miss her home. That evening, Daniel spoke with Mary, telling her what he had learned. Mary listened carefully, then said, "We need to tell the others. If they understand the lights are not threats, maybe the fear will calm." Daniel agreed, but he knew convincing the village would not be easy. Many people had already made up their minds at the next council meeting. Daniel stood before the elders and explained what Taya had told him. The lights are not signals for war. They are messages from her family. They want to know if she's safe. Mr. Lawson scoffed, "And you believe her? She could be lying to keep us off guard." Daniel stood his ground. "She has done nothing but help us. She healed Peter. She has shown us only kindness. Why would she lie now?" The room fell silent. Mr. Carter stroked his beard thoughtfully. "The boy has a point. We have no evidence that she means us harm. Perhaps we are letting fear control us." Some men nodded, but others remained skeptical. The meeting ended without a clear decision, leaving the village still divided. That night, Taya made a bold decision. She could not let the misunderstanding continue. She waited until the guards changed shifts. When their attention was briefly divided, then she slipped out of the barn, moving silently through the shadows. She did not run away. Instead, she walked to the edge of the village, to a spot where she could see the hills clearly. Taya gathered some dry wood and built a small fire. She let the flames grow, then used a blanket to cover and uncover the fire, creating controlled bursts of smoke and light. She sent a simple message, 3 quick flashes, a pause, then 1 long steady light. It was a signal that meant, "I am safe, do not worry. Stay away." She repeated the pattern twice, then put out the fire. Daniel had been watching from a distance, unable to sleep. He saw Taya's signal and understood what she was doing. She was protecting both her people and the village, trying to prevent conflict. He felt a deep admiration for her courage. When Taya turned to walk back, she saw Daniel standing there. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Daniel said softly, "You are trying to keep everyone safe, aren't you?" Taya nodded. "Peace is better than war." The next morning, the lights on the hills did not appear. The silence was both comforting and eerie. Some villagers believed the increased guard had scared the Apache away. Others wondered if something had changed. Daniel knew the truth. Taya's message had worked. Her people understood that she was safe, and they were respecting her wish to avoid conflict. But not everyone was satisfied. Mr. Lawson continued to spread fear, claiming that the silence was suspicious. "They're planning something bigger. Mark my words," he said to anyone who would listen. A small group of men began to agree with him, forming a circle of distrust that threatened the fragile peace. Mary noticed the growing tension and decided to act. She invited several women to her home for tea, including Mrs. Reed, whose son Taya had healed. As they sat together, Mary spoke openly. "Taya saved Peter's life. She has shown us nothing but goodness. Yet some of our men want to see her as an enemy. Is this who we are?" Mrs. Reed nodded firmly. "You're right. My boy would have died without her. I will not stand by and let them harm her." The women made a pact that day. They would defend Taya and speak the truth to their husbands and sons. They would not let fear destroy the chance for understanding. It was a quiet rebellion, but a powerful one. Women had influence in ways that men often overlooked. That evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Taya sat in the barn feeling a strange sense of hope. She did not know what the future held, but she knew she had done the right thing. She had reached out to her people, and she had earned the trust of a few villagers. It was a small beginning, but it was something. Daniel visited her one last time that night, bringing her a warm blanket. He said, "I don't know how this will end, but I promise you, I will do everything I can to keep you safe." Taya smiled and replied, "You are a good man, Daniel. Your heart speaks louder than your fear." Those words stayed with Daniel long after he left, reminding him that courage and kindness could change the course of history. Winter arrived suddenly, like an unwelcome guest who refused to leave one morning. The village woke to find the ground covered in thick white snow. The sky was gray and heavy, promising more to come. The temperature dropped so fast that water in the well froze solid, and the wind howled through every crack in every wall. The villagers huddled in their homes, burning firewood at an alarming rate. Within days, the storm grew worse. Snow fell continuously, piling up against doors and windows. Blocking paths and roads, the village became isolated. cut off from neighboring towns. Supplies that people thought would last through winter suddenly seemed insufficient. Fear returned, but this time it was not fear of Apache warriors. It was fear of nature itself. The children suffered most. Their small bodies could not handle the extreme cold. Many fell ill with fever and chills. Mothers wrapped them in blankets and kept them close to the fire. But still they shivered. The village doctor did his best, but his medicines were running low, and some illnesses did not respond to his treatments. Desperation spread through the community like the cold itself. One night, a young boy named Samuel became dangerously ill. He was only 5 years old, the son of Mr. and Mrs. Harrison. Samuel's fever burned so high that he stopped recognizing his own mother. His lips turned blue and his breathing became shallow. Mrs. Harrison cried beside his bed, holding his tiny hand, begging him to stay awake. The doctor came and shook his head sadly. "There's nothing more I can do. I'm sorry." Word of Samuel's condition reached Mary, who immediately thought of Taya. She rushed to the barn through the freezing snow. Her shawl pulled tight around her shoulders. She found Taya sitting near a small fire, quietly sewing a torn piece of cloth. "Taya, please, a child is dying. Can you help him?" Mary's voice was urgent. Her eyes pleading, Taya stood immediately, gathering her small collection of herbs and plants. She wrapped them carefully in cloth and followed Mary through the storm. The wind bit at their faces, and the snow made every step difficult. But Taya did not hesitate. She moved with purpose, her mind already thinking of what the boy might need. When they arrived at the Harrison home, the room was warm but tense. Mr. Harrison looked at Taya with suspicion. "What is she doing here?" he demanded. Mrs. Harrison, desperate and broken, said quietly, "If there's any chance she can help, we must let her try." Mr. Harrison stepped aside reluctantly, his jaw tight with worry and doubt. Taya knelt beside Samuel's bed, gently touching his forehead. She could feel the heat radiating from his small body. She unwrapped her herbs and began working quickly. She crushed dried leaves into a paste, mixing them with melted snow and a pinch of something that looked like tree bark. She spread the paste on Samuel's chest and neck, then made a tea from other plants. Mrs. Harrison helped lift Samuel's head so Taya could give him the tea. The boy was barely conscious, but he swallowed small sips. Taya then began humming softly, a gentle melody that seemed to calm the room. She placed her hands on Samuel's chest, not pressing, just resting, as if transferring warmth and energy. The room fell silent except for her humming and the crackling of the fire. Hours passed. The family watched anxiously. Mr. Harrison paced back and forth, unable to sit still. Mary prayed quietly in the corner. Taya remained focused, checking Samuel's breathing, adjusting the paste, giving him more tea when he could swallow. She did not rush. She did not panic. She simply did what she knew how to do. As dawn approached, something changed. Samuel's breathing became steadier. The blue color faded from his lips. His fever began to break, sweat forming on his forehead, which Taya gently wiped away. Mrs. Harrison gasped and reached for her son's hand, squeezing it tightly. Samuel's eyes fluttered open for a brief moment, and he whispered, "Mama." Mrs. Harrison burst into tears, this time from relief and joy. By midday, Samuel was sitting up slightly, drinking broth that his mother had prepared. He was weak but clearly recovering. The change was undeniable. Mr. Harrison stood in the doorway, watching Taya pack her herbs. His eyes were wet with tears he refused to shed. Finally, he walked over to her and said, "Thank you, I was wrong about you. You saved my boy." Taya nodded and replied simply, "Children are precious, all children." News of Samuel's recovery spread quickly. Despite the storm, neighbors came to the Harrison home to see the miracle for themselves. They found Samuel laughing weakly at his sister's jokes, his color returning, his spirit alive. The villagers looked at Taya with new eyes, filled with gratitude and wonder. Over the next few days, more families came to Taya for help. An elderly woman with painful joints, a farmer with a deep cough, a young mother whose baby would not stop crying. Taya treated each person with the same care and respect. She did not ask for payment. She did not seek praise. She simply helped. Her hands worked with skill, and her presence brought comfort. The children of the village began to visit Taya more often, bringing her small gifts, a carved wooden bird, a handful of berries they had saved, a drawing made with charcoal. Taya accepted each gift with a warm smile. She taught them simple songs and showed them how to identify healing plants in the snow. The children adored her. seeing in her a kindness that adults often forgot. Even Mr. Lawson, who had been Taya's loudest critic, fell silent. His own daughter had been helped by Taya's medicine when she developed a severe cough. He did not apologize openly, but he stopped spreading rumors. That small silence was its own form of admission. Daniel watched all of this unfold with quiet pride. He saw how Taya had changed the village without demanding anything in return. She had shown them that kindness was stronger than fear, that helping others was more powerful than suspicion. He visited her one evening as the storm finally began to ease. "You are teaching us all how to be better," he said softly. Taya looked at him and smiled. "Healing is not just for the body. It is for the heart too." That night, as the snow stopped falling and the stars emerged in the clear sky, the village felt different. The tension that had gripped everyone for weeks began to lift. People spoke more kindly to each other. They shared food and firewood without being asked. They checked on their neighbors, especially the elderly and the sick. Taya's presence had created a ripple effect, reminding everyone of their shared humanity. Mary sat with Taya in the barn that evening, warming her hands by the fire. "You have given us more than medicine," she said. "You have given us hope." Taya gazed into the flames and replied, "Hope is the first medicine. Without it, nothing else works." Mary nodded, understanding the deep wisdom in those simple words. As the fire crackled and the cold night settled in, both women felt a quiet peace, knowing that something important had shifted, something that could never be undone. As winter slowly loosened its grip on the land, something unexpected happened. The ice on the well began to melt, and the sun appeared more often, warming the frozen earth. The village seemed to breathe again, and with that breath came new questions. People began to wonder about Taya's story. Where had she come from? Why had she been alone that day? What did her people think had happened to her? Daniel had been thinking about these questions for weeks. He knew that understanding Taya's truth was important, not just for her, but for the future of the village. One evening, he sat with Mary and asked, "Do you think Taya would tell us her story?" "The real story." Mary considered this carefully, then said, "Perhaps if she feels safe enough." The next day, Mary invited Taya to her small cottage. She prepared tea and sat across from the young woman. Daniel joined them, along with a few others who had grown close to Taya, including Mrs. Reed and Mrs. Harrison. The room was warm and filled with gentle light from the afternoon sun. Mary spoke softly. "Taya, we would like to understand. Why were you alone that day? What happened?" Taya looked at each person in the room. Searching their faces, she saw no judgment, only curiosity and kindness. She took a deep breath and began to speak in careful English, her words slow but clear. "I was not alone by accident. I was there to pray. To honor my grandmother who passed." She paused, her eyes distant with memory. "In my people's way, we go to special places, away from others, to speak with spirits, to remember those we love." The room was silent. Everyone listened with full attention. Taya continued. "That morning, I went to the place where my grandmother taught me about plants, about healing. I brought flowers and said prayers. I did not know anyone would find me. I did not know I would not go home." Her voice trembled slightly, but she remained composed. Daniel felt a wave of guilt wash over him. He had taken her from a sacred moment, from a place of peace and memory. He said quietly, "I am so sorry, Taya. I didn't understand. I was afraid, and I acted without thinking." Taya looked at him with soft eyes. "You did not know fear makes people do strange things." Mary leaned forward. "Have your people been searching for you?" Taya nodded. "Yes, the lights on the hills. Those were my brother and my uncle. They were watching, making sure I was alive. When I sent my signal, I told them I was safe. I told them to wait, to trust that peace was possible." Mrs. Harrison gasped. "You told them to stay away, even though you wanted to go home?" Taya nodded again. "Yes, because I saw something here. I saw people who were afraid, but also people who could learn. I saw children with open hearts. I saw Daniel's kindness, Mary's love. I saw that maybe, just maybe, our peoples could stop fearing each other." The revelation hung in the air like morning mist. These simple words carried enormous weight. Taya had sacrificed her own freedom, her own longing for home, to prevent violence, to create a bridge between two worlds that had been separated by fear and misunderstanding. Mrs. Reed wiped tears from her eyes. "You saved my son's life, and you did it even though we kept you here against your will." Even though some of us treated you with suspicion, Taya smiled gently. A child's life is more important than anger. Healing is more important than revenge. Daniel stood and walked to the window. Looking out at the village, he could see children playing in the melting snow, men repairing fences damaged by the storm, women hanging laundry in the fresh air. Everything looked normal, but nothing would ever be the same. Taya had changed them all. That evening, Daniel went to his uncle and told him everything Taya had shared. Mr. Carter listened carefully, his expression thoughtful. When Daniel finished, his uncle said, "We owe her a great debt. She could have let her people attack us. She could have called for help, but instead she chose peace. That takes more courage than any warrior has." The council met again the next day. This time they invited Taya to speak to them directly. She stood before the 5 elders, no longer a captive but an honored guest. She told them her story again, adding details about her people, their ways, their desire for peace. She explained that her tribe had been pushed from their lands many times, that they lived in constant movement. "Always searching for safety?" Mr. Carter asked. "What do your people want from us?" Taya answered honestly. "They want to know that you will not take more land, that you will not hunt them, that maybe one day there can be trade and friendship instead of fear." The elders exchanged glances. Some nodded slowly, others looked uncertain. Mr. Lawson, who had been silent throughout the meeting, finally spoke. "How do we know we can trust them?" Taya looked at him directly and said, "The same way they must learn to trust you, one small step at a time. One act of kindness at a time. Trust is not given. It is built." The meeting ended with a decision. The village would send a message to Taya's people. They would invite them to meet, to talk, to begin the long process of building trust. It was a risky decision, one that not everyone agreed with, but it was a beginning. That night, Taya stood at the edge of the village once more, building a small fire. This time, Daniel stood beside her, helping her arrange the wood. Together they sent a new signal, 3 flashes, a pause, then 3 more. It meant, "Come in peace, let us talk." The signal traveled across the dark landscape, carrying hope into the unknown. Mary watched from a distance, her heart full of emotion. She had witnessed something rare and beautiful, a young woman's courage transforming an entire community. She whispered a prayer into the cold night air, asking for wisdom and safety for everyone. Inside the barn, which Taya still called home, Mrs. Harrison had left a gift, a warm quilt she had sewn herself. Mrs. Reed had brought fresh bread. Tommy and Lucy had drawn pictures of Taya with flowers around her. These small gestures spoke louder than words. They said, "You belong here. You are one of us." As Taya returned to the barn that night, she felt something she had not felt in weeks, hope mixed with peace. She did not know what tomorrow would bring, whether her people would come, whether the village would truly accept them, but she knew that the truth had been spoken. The lies and misunderstandings had been cleared away. What remained was possibility, fragile but real. Daniel sat outside under the stars, thinking about everything that had happened. From the moment he had accidentally captured Taya to this very night, his life had changed completely. He had learned that courage was not about being fearless. It was about doing the right thing even when fear was present. Taya had taught him that, and he would never forget it. As the stars wheeled overhead, Daniel made a silent vow. He would protect this fragile peace, no matter what it cost him, because some things, he realized, were worth fighting for, and peace was one of them. 3 days after the signal was sent, something remarkable happened. At dawn, a small group appeared on the eastern ridge, silhouetted against the rising sun. The village guard spotted them immediately and rang the warning bell. People rushed from their homes, some grabbing weapons, others gathering children close. Fear returned like an old wound reopening, but Daniel, who had been watching the hills since sunrise, noticed something important. The group carried no weapons. They held branches with white cloth tied to them, symbols of peace. He ran to the village square shouting, "Wait, look. They come in peace." The guards hesitated, lowering their rifles slightly but keeping them ready. Mr. Carter came forward, his face serious but calm. He ordered the guards to hold their positions but not to shoot. The entire village gathered, watching as the Apache group slowly descended the hill. There were 5 of them, 3 men and 2 women, walking with quiet dignity. Their movements were deliberate and careful, showing no aggression. Taya emerged from the barn, her heart pounding with emotion she could barely contain. Mary stood beside her, holding her hand for support. As the group came closer, Taya's eyes filled with tears. She recognized them, her brother, her uncle, her aunt, and two respected elders from her tribe. She had not seen them in what felt like a lifetime. When they reached the edge of the village, the Apache group stopped. Taya's brother, a young man named Dakota, stepped forward. He looked at his sister with eyes full of relief and love. But he did not run to her. He respected the situation, understanding that trust must be built slowly, carefully. Mr. Carter approached them. Daniel and Mary walked with him. Taya stood between the two groups. A living bridge, Dakota spoke first, his English broken but sincere. "We come for peace. We thank you for keeping our sister safe. We want to talk." His voice carried the weight of many unspoken feelings. Concern, hope, and determination. Carter nodded. "You are welcome here as friends. Let us sit together and speak openly." He gestured toward the village hall, the largest building where important meetings were held. The Apache group followed, and soon the hall filled with villagers, everyone wanting to witness this historic moment. Inside, chairs were arranged in a circle. Taya sat between her family and her new friends. Creating a literal connection, Dakota began by telling their story. He explained how Taya had been on a sacred journey, honoring their grandmother's memory, how they had searched desperately when she did not return, how they had watched from the hills, torn between rescuing her and trusting her judgment. He spoke of his people's struggles, how they had been pushed from their lands repeatedly, how they lived in constant movement, seeking only safety and dignity. An elder named Neshoba spoke next, his voice deep and measured. "We do not seek war. We seek understanding. For too long our peoples have feared each other. Fear brings suffering to everyone, Mrs." Harrison stood up, her voice trembling but strong. "Your sister saved my son's life when our doctor could do nothing. She used her knowledge to heal him. We owe her everything." She looked at Dakota with gratitude shining in her eyes. Several other villagers nodded. Murmuring agreement, Mrs. Reed also stood. "She has shown us that healing is not just medicine. It is also kindness, patience, and wisdom. She has taught our children, helped our sick, and asked for nothing in return." Her words created ripples through the crowd, softening hearts that had been hardened by years of fear. Dakota listened carefully, then turned to his sister, speaking in their native language. Taya responded, her voice soft but clear. Then she translated for everyone. "My brother asks if I was treated badly. I told him no. I told him that some feared me at first, but many showed me kindness. I told him that children here have good hearts, and that their parents can learn." An Apache woman named Ayana spoke next. "In our tradition, when someone saves a life, a sacred bond is created. Your village and our people are now connected through the lives Taya has touched. This is not something that can be broken easily." Her words carried spiritual weight, and even those who did not fully understand felt their importance. Daniel stood up, his voice steady despite his nervousness. "I was the one who brought Taya here. I did not understand what I was doing. I acted from fear and ignorance. I am deeply sorry." He looked directly at Dakota. "I ask for your forgiveness, and I promise to work toward peace between our peoples." Dakota studied Daniel for a long moment, then stood and walked toward him. The room held its breath. Unsure what would happen next, Dakota extended his hand. The gesture clearly learned from settlers. Daniel took it, and they shook hands firmly. "You protected my sister when you learned the truth. You have honor," Dakota said simply. The tension in the room broke like a wave against shore. People began talking, first in whispers, then in normal voices. Questions were asked, stories were shared. The Apache elders spoke about their customs, their ceremonies, their deep connection to the land. The villagers listened, discovering that the people they had feared for so long were not so different from themselves. Mary prepared food and brought it out for everyone. Tea, bread, dried fruits, and meat were shared. The Apache group contributed their own food, dried buffalo meat and a special corn preparation. The act of sharing food created a warmth that words alone could not achieve. As the afternoon wore on, practical matters were discussed, boundaries were proposed, areas where both groups could hunt without conflict, possibilities for trade, corn and cloth from the village in exchange for buffalo hides and herbal medicines from the Apache. It was agreed that families from both groups would meet regularly to build trust gradually. Tommy and Lucy, The children who had befriended Taya approached Dakota shyly. Lucy held up the carved bird that Taya had given her. Dakota smiled and knelt down. "You like my sister's carving?" he asked. Lucy nodded enthusiastically. Dakota reached into his pouch and pulled out another small carving. "A tiny horse for your friend," he said. Giving it to Tommy, the boy's eyes grew wide with wonder. As evening approached, the Apache group prepared to leave. Taya faced a difficult choice. Her family wanted her to return home, but she also felt a responsibility to the village. She spoke to both groups. "I will go home with my family now, but I will return often to help, to teach, to remind everyone that peace is possible." Both sides agreed, understanding that her role as a bridge was not finished. Before leaving, Taya walked through the village one last time. She visited Samuel, now running and playing like any healthy child. She hugged Mary tightly, whispering thanks for her unwavering kindness. She said goodbye to the children who had brought her drawings and flowers, promising to return soon. Daniel walked with her to the edge of the village. Neither spoke for a while. Finally, Daniel said, "You changed everything. You showed us that courage is not about fighting. It is about choosing kindness even when you are afraid." Taya smiled. "And you learned well. Now you must teach others." As the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant colors, Taya walked away with her family. The villagers watched until the small group disappeared over the ridge. But this time there was no fear. Only hope. Children waved, women wiped tears. Men stood tall with new understanding. That night the village felt different, lighter somehow, as if a great burden had been lifted. Families gathered around fires, talking about what had happened, about what it meant, about the future they might build together. Daniel sat with his uncle, both staring into the flames. "This is just the beginning," Mr. Carter said quietly. "Building real peace will take time, effort and patience," Daniel nodded. "But now we know it is possible." Taya proved that. The fire crackled and sparked, sending light into the darkness, a small but persistent reminder that even in the coldest, darkest times, warmth and hope could survive. Seasons passed, and the world around the village changed in ways both subtle and profound. Spring brought new growth, not just to the land but to the relationships between the Apache and the settlers. What had begun as fear and suspicion slowly transformed into something remarkable, a genuine friendship built on mutual respect and understanding. Taya kept her promise, returning to the village regularly. Sometimes she came alone, other times with her brother or aunt. She brought medicine, knowledge, and stories from her people. The villagers welcomed her each time with open arms. Children ran to greet her. Adults smiled and waved. She had become a cherished part of their community, even though she belonged to two worlds. Daniel grew into a leader in the village. His experience with Taya had changed him deeply. He no longer saw the world in simple terms of us and them. Instead, he understood that people were complex, that fear could be overcome, and that peace required constant effort. He often traveled to the Apache camps, learning their ways, sharing meals, and building bridges that his uncle had started. The trade agreements flourished. The village provided cloth, metal tools, and flour, while the Apache brought buffalo hides, medicinal herbs, and beautiful handcrafted items. These exchanges were more than commerce, they were acts of trust. Each transaction reinforced the belief that cooperation benefited everyone. Mary became a teacher of sorts. She organized gatherings, where Apache women and village women could share skills. The Apache women taught plant identification, hide preparation, and traditional weaving techniques. The village women taught reading, baking, and needlework. These sessions filled with laughter, broken language attempts, and growing friendships. The barriers between cultures began to dissolve. Tommy and Lucy, now older, became ambassadors of peace in their own way. They learned some Apache words and taught Apache children English phrases. They played together during visits, creating friendships that knew no boundaries of culture or skin color. These children, growing up with understanding rather than fear, represented the true future of peace. One summer, when Taya was visiting, a crisis emerged that tested everything they had built. A group of young men from a neighboring settlement, outsiders who knew nothing of the peace agreement, rode into the area looking for trouble. They had heard rumors of Apache in the region and came with hostile intentions, believing all natives were enemies. These strangers encountered a small Apache hunting party near the river. Words were exchanged, tempers flared, and violence seemed inevitable. But before shots could be fired, Daniel and several village men arrived. They had been alerted by a child who had seen the strangers riding toward Apache territory. Daniel positioned himself between the two groups. His hands raised. "Stop! These people are our friends, our allies. There will be no fighting here." The strangers laughed mockingly. "Friends with savages, you've gone soft." One of them spat on the ground. Daniel's jaw tightened, but he remained calm. "We have learned that ignorance is the real enemy, not the people you fear." Mr. Carter arrived with more villagers. Standing shoulder to shoulder with Daniel, Mrs. Harrison brought her son Samuel, now a healthy young boy. She pointed to Taya, who stood with the Apache hunters. "That woman saved my child's life. She has shown us nothing but kindness. If you threaten them, you threaten us." Her voice carried conviction that silenced the strangers. The outsiders looked around, seeing villagers and Apache standing together, united. They saw children of both peoples playing nearby, unconcerned. They saw elderly Apache and settlers sitting together in the shade, talking quietly. The visual evidence of peace was undeniable. Slowly, the strangers lowered their weapons. Confused and uncomfortable, they rode away without another word. That evening, both communities gathered for a celebration, not just to mark their victory over violence, but to honor the journey they had traveled together. Food was shared, stories were told, and music filled the air. Apache drums blended with fiddles, creating a sound that belonged to neither culture alone but to both. Taya sat with Mary, Daniel, and her brother Dakota, watching the celebration. "Do you remember the first day?" Daniel asked. "When I brought you here, afraid and confused," Taya smiled. "I remember a young man who made a mistake but learned from it. That is the best kind of person," Dakota added. "My sister has always had wisdom beyond her years. She saw what could be, not just what was," Mary nodded. "She taught us all that lesson. Now look at us. Who would have believed this was possible?" As years continued to pass, the story of Taya and the village became legend. It was told around fires on both sides, passed down to children and grandchildren. The tale grew with each telling, sometimes exaggerated, sometimes simplified, but always carrying the same essential truth, that one person's courage and compassion could change the world. The village prospered, partly because of the knowledge shared by the Apache, better farming techniques, understanding of weather patterns and medicinal plants all improved life for the settlers. In turn, the Apache gained access to tools and goods that made their own lives easier. Both communities were stronger together than they had ever been apart. Daniel eventually married and had children of his own. He taught them the story of Taya from the time they were small. "Never judge people by fear," he would say. "Always look for their humanity first." His children grew up visiting Apache camps, learning both cultures, becoming living examples of what integration could look like. Taya herself married an Apache warrior named Mato, and they had 3 children. She taught them her healing arts, passing down knowledge that had saved so many lives, but she also taught them English and brought them to the village regularly. Her children grew up knowing that peace was possible, that different peoples could coexist, that understanding was always worth the effort. On her last visit to the village many years later, Taya was an old woman with silver in her hair. The village had grown, new buildings stood where once there had been only prairie. But the spirit remained the same. Children still played together. Families still traded and shared meals. The peace had lasted. Mary, also elderly now, sat with her friend one final time. "You changed us all," Mary said softly. "You showed us who we could become." Taya squeezed her hand. "We changed each other. That is how peace works. No one person creates it alone. It is built together. One kind act, one brave choice, one open heart at a time." As the sun set that evening, casting golden light across the village, Taya looked at everything she and her friends had built. Not buildings or roads, but something far more valuable. A community where fear had been replaced by understanding, where walls had been replaced by bridges, where enemies had become family. The children of the village, both Apache and settler, gathered around her begging for stories. She smiled and began to tell them about a young girl who went to pray for her grandmother and accidentally changed history. As she spoke, her voice strong despite her age, the children listened with wide eyes, absorbing not just the story but the lesson within it. That night, as stars filled the sky, the village was peaceful. Laughter echoed from homes, smoke rose from chimneys, and in the distance, Apache campfires glowed warmly. It was a scene that once would have been impossible. Born from fear, accidentally transformed into friendship. From capture, accidentally transformed into connection. Daniel, now gray-haired himself, stood at the edge of the village, looking at those distant fires with satisfaction. He thought about that morning long ago when he had stumbled upon a young Apache girl. How different his life might have been if he had made different choices. How grateful he was that Taya had been patient enough to teach him, brave enough to trust him, wise enough to see possibility in disaster. The legacy of the girl who shocked. The village was not measured in monuments or written histories. It was measured in children who played together without seeing differences, in families who trusted each other across cultural lines, in communities that chose understanding over fear. It was measured in every moment of peace, every act of kindness, every bridge built between human hearts. And so the story lived on, passed from generation to generation, a reminder that sometimes the most unexpected moments create the most profound changes, that courage comes in many forms, and that one person, choosing compassion over fear, can inspire an entire community to transform. The legacy of Taya was not just what she did, but what she inspired others to become. And that legacy would endure as long as people chose to remember, to learn, and to love.